Beep, beep. Oh, what is up, guys? My name is Sam World, and I make music production and sound design videos here on YouTube. Now, in today's episode of In the Dojo, we have Ssol.
Yo, what's up?
And then we're joined by an amazing producer based out of New York. We have CID. What's up, brother?
What's up? What's going on?
I'm super excited today because you're going to be showing us your track, Duro. It has, I believe, a sampled vocal that reminds me a little bit of like reggaeton in a way. Kind of like it, man.
Thank you. Yeah, it is a reggaeton sample, actually. It was Hector el Father. It was like an old record. And I mean, my ideas start different every time. I think this one I had like a bit of a groove going, and then I was just like, what would be a cool little vocal to use on this? And I found the acapella to that song. And then at the end of the project, we got the rights to, we cleared the publishing side, but then had it resung. So what you're hearing is a re-sing of the original vocal. But yeah, man, it's been just one of those records that's been just fun to play, and like a lot of people support it, which is cool.
I love this track. It's a real great groove, and you said that you started with the groove on this one. So maybe you could break down the kick and the bass, if that's where you started, and tell us a little bit about how that came together.
There's a couple layers. This layer is literally just hitting right there. Mm-hmm. And then I have a click, which is the same kick, just I wanted to get just the top end from this. So that's it. No processing at all. Is it technically perfect? No, but I mean, I think a lot of these like techier records, it's like the dirtiness is what makes them. So I'm not too worried on it being like a perfect kick, or like, you know, I kind of want it to kind of sound like shit a little bit.
So with those three layers, do you do anything to pull them together, or is it just volume that you basically mix them together with?
This was just volume. Normally, I probably would have done some kind of compression. I didn't on this one. And looking back, it just worked. I mean, there's a lot on my master chain going on that I'm just gluing stuff together too. But I came up with this just messing with one of those, like we were talking earlier, like one of those Max for Live sequencers. And then from there, I just converted to MIDI. Just a 1-bar pattern repeating. I just rolled off a lot of that kind of mid and top end. And then the way I tend to sidechain, I love kickstart. I kind of do a couple different things. If I start like processing, distortion stuff, you kind of want the sidechain after, but it's just once you start adding the sidechain after, the latency just messes up the timing of the sidechain. I'll do my sidechaining first. What I do is have, just to get out of the initial click and kind of punch of the kick, 100% on like the shortest one. And then what I do a lot is, you know, especially when I noticed it's been like kind of techier stuff, is you still want to hear a lot of that mid. So, but you don't want it to fight with your kick. So I'll do LFO tool. You can use, you know, volume shape or whatever, but LFO tool is so easy. And I'll do,
yeah, I see that,
100% of the volume, and I'll split it. So I'll make sure that below 80, everything is getting out of the kick. And I'll play with this, like, you know, where I want it as far as how much of the sub is getting removed. But I just want to be away from the kick as much as possible.
At first, I was just like, what is this madness? 3 sidechains, but it makes sense. You got one for the click, right? And then that big one, you're doing it to the low end only, and you're splitting it up so that the lows get sidechained, but not the top. And then the top part of the bass gets sidechained by the Nicky Romero, right?
I just go by ear, you know, and what I think sounds right. There's no science to it.
Very interesting, though, but the theory makes sense on it. Like, it's not, you know.
Then I do a bunch of processing, just cutting, just a bit more saturation. I love this in Saturn. I always start with this preset that just sounds fucking awesome. In the original preset, this is actually like the bottom band isn't bypassed. I always bypass it. I don't want to affect below 100. And then I'll kind of slide this back and forth depending on where I want it to start saturating. And for something like this, I'll wet dry it. A little more EQ. I felt like probably the saturation was just kind of having too much go on there. Compression. And then what I'll do, I'll tend to use track spacer, which is great for more like a traditional compressor, except it's multi-band. So you can control, what frequencies you're hitting. This is also a sick plugin. Again, just boosting. It's a saturator, but it looks like an EQ, and you have different styles of saturation, but it's just brilliant because it's like, you're looking at it as if it's an EQ, and it's okay, I'm going to saturate just this, with whatever kind of saturation type, and it sounds really good. And that's it, man. I mean, it's, I think my logic for this record, I just wanted to make something like simple groover that's just like.
So do you want to take us through the drums on this project then?
Yeah, I'm very curious on drums. I'm assuming the drums is where all the variation is at.
I feel like this is the sound of the snare, and it's just like a, very pokey kind of sound. And then I have two claps later that are more traditional, but this is the one that's like kind of adds just like the way it pokes through. Group processing on that, nothing, but then I'm going into like the main drum buzz. But I use this a lot. I think it's the best transient designer. I'm not doing much. I'm just kind of having it poke out even more. Just boosting the attack, cutting the sustain.
When you're picking your clap layers, is there like a science to it, or you're just like for instance, snare sounds mid-lowy, I need a clap that's high pitch, and then this clap has a lot of mid highs, but now I need a higher one, or it's just whatever sounds good to you, like you're just like boom boom.
Yeah, it's feel. I mean, if there's I always will find whatever the main clap is, then start building the rest of the drums and be like, I feel like I'm missing more low mid. I want something that kind of just like knocks, or it's like, this is missing top. And instead of just sitting there and cranking an EQ, I'll maybe find a sample that has a bit more top end or does something different, like spatially, that kind of adds that, like hats. I think this was the first. Sounds phasey, but I liked it. I'd say this is the main hat pattern. Again, just EQ. It's a loop that I just EQ'd a little bit. Okay. And then, just a bunch of loops. I wanted just the kind of air from a loop, and I like whatever this was. I just liked it up there. Same thing with this hat loop. I just didn't want to take up space, but I wanted to add the movement. So it's just EQing. This adds a lot, and it was just cut from a loop. So that's kind of what's giving it the most of the rhythm. But I've been using drum bus a lot. I think like the drive on it is amazing, but you have to just use like, again, like I'm using 5% wet dry. And it's very subtle, but it just kind of glues. It makes it feel like one loop, That's 100%. You lose.
Definitely, bro. Sounds choked at 100%.
Yeah. And just the one thing is like when you do use this by default, I put the damp all the way up, because or else you're going to lose the top end. And I just mess with kind of drive and crunch on it. And I just did a bit of compression. And again, neutron, if I'm like, I feel like it's not exciting enough, I'll go to a transient designer. And I'm mostly just poking out the attack. And then I'll wet dry it. If I feel like I'm losing too much of like the sustain, like this is too, the transients are too crazy. So I don't know what I had it at. 15%.
Yeah.
And it just kind of adds more movement. I probably use a utility just to kind of match the before and after to be able to A/B what this stuff was doing. And then just a little bit of bus compression. There's one other sound in here that kind of one of those like happy accidents, I guess, but it's a piece of the vocal. So it sounds like a synth, but it's literally just saying Duro. Oh. Just pitched up and then a little EQ, brought down the width. So that's kind of like, instead of, like I said earlier, like there's not many synths going on, you know, it's just about the groove and the rhythm and the vocal.
Was that the gnarly vocal loop that we hear throughout the song, or is there another one?
No. Yeah, so that's the main driving, like the vocal stutter.
Oh, there it is.
So I've been doing this a lot. A lot of people have been doing it. It was a trick that I think I first learned from Wax Motif, like, I don't know how many years ago, 2015 or 2014 or something.
Did you like do sessions with him, or?
Yeah, I had done a record that he was playing a lot, and then I was just in LA. He's like, let's get in the studio. I was like, yeah, cool. So we had started an idea back then. It never came out. I saw him not too long ago, like, we got to finish that track. But anyway, one thing that I learned from him was how to shorten, mostly for drums and stuff, but you know, you put beats and then under the transients, you can have it just start at the transient, and then kind of, again, it's kind of like a transient designer, but you can just back off on the length of how long the sound plays for after each transient hit. And sometimes you got to mess with it, especially with like a vocal or something, but so it's just kind of making it stuttery, and that's what kind of gave the rhythm. If you set it to transient, then it's kind of able to, it's like, this is where I think the transient. So you might have to kind of go back and play certain transients at different places. There's a million ways to do this. This is just the easiest. And then with the bass, the kick, and the drums. That's the main rhythm. And then vocal, I did, again, like, I think a lot of the effects stuff I did is really just automating things on the vocal and even the stutter. So like I don't use beat repeat a lot, but for this record I was like, this will be cool, you know. And it's just so this is all just beat repeat, really. And I'm just automating, really just automating the volume of it. You kind of build the record around an original vocal that most of the time you can't use. So what I did was I used the original vocal and sent it to Lee. He really liked it for Republic Mars. We're like, great. I was like, okay, I'm gonna go get the vocal resung. So vocal on here, that was off.
Wait, so the vocal was resung, like someone else sang the?
Yeah, there's companies that basically, so if you have a track that has a sample, you have to technically, if you want to use that original master recording, you have to clear the publishing and the master side. But a lot of times you go out, get the rights to clear the publishing side, and then re-record the vocal. So now it's a new master, and you don't need to clear the master.
Makes sense.
A lot of the guys in the Discord are super interested about how that whole thing works. So you send it to the label originally with the original master on it, and then if they're willing to clear it, they'll be like, hey, we'll clear it if you get it resung? Or how does that usually tend to work?
I always make the record with the original sample. You want to know that there's excitement there before you put in the work to clear it. Sometimes the label will be like, oh, we'll clear this for you. Other times they'll be like, oh, if you can get this cleared, we'll put it out, right? So, I mean, for example, it was like 2015, I sampled TLC No Scrubs, and my initial reaction was like, I think I had played it for Cascade at the time. And he's like, there's no way you'll clear that. And I was like, yeah, you're right. So I was like, okay, let me put this out as a free download right around Miami. So I had literally made artwork for it, and I sent it to Tiesto. He had followed me on Twitter, and I was like, I got to send him, so maybe he'll like it, whatever. Sent it to him, and his reaction was like, what are you doing with this? Like, let me put it out. I was like, if you can clear it, you could put it out. So I stopped the whole kind of idea to just do it as a free download. And musical freedom is through spinning. 8 months passed, and we're following up like every week or 2 weeks, or like anything going on with this. And it got to a point where they just, sometimes with these samples, and I have another one now that's similar, it's like you're at the mercy of other people, right? Because it's their freaking song. Either number one, they could be like, I don't want someone butchering my fucking classic, or maybe they're not in the loop of it, and their publisher isn't reaching out to them, or they're really bad at email or whatever. So if this was a situation where I got a call from Musical Freedom and Spin, and they're like, we have to give up on this, like it's not going to happen. There was some guy I met who had helped me clear at the time. I did a record on Size called Ill Behavior, and I was like, man, I know this is a long shot, like, do you know anyone who's connected to TLC? And he's like, actually, I managed their TLC. And I was like, what? It was fucking just crazy. And so here's the thing, right? With masters, publishing is a lot easier to clear, because you normally, a publisher or the artist themselves owns the master, the publishing side. But it gets tricky on the master, because especially like, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, a lot of people, what they would do is be like, okay, United States, what label do we want to work with? What is the best label in the US? Okay, this label. Great. Let's sign the master there. And then you go to the UK, be like, okay, who's the best label in the UK? And you sign the master there. But when it comes down to clearing the master side for a sample, you have to clear it in every territory. So you have to deal with, okay, like this label owns it in the US, this label owns it in the UK. And most of them will ask for an advance because it's their physical recording, right? So in this situation with TLC, it was, they just got new recordings done. It's just them re-singing the same vocals. So usually there's a fee attached on that side. So I paid them a fee for using this new recording. But it's different. I mean, even before I use a sample, I'm like, okay, if I have an idea in my mind, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna look up who controls this master, like what, in like 5-10 minutes, be like, okay, what's the level of probability that I can clear this? A good label will be like, yeah, we'll help you clear it.
Thanks for your insights, man. I mean, it seems like you've studied on this, you've experienced it, so it's good to hear from you on that. Like, ask these questions.
My management has always said, like, I'll do another, be like, please don't use any more samples,
Okay, so going back to the project, so you got you got 3 sung vocals from the label. It'd be nice to go into the processing on how you got them to sound good.
Before going into this project, I'll load up what the resung vocals sound like, compare them to the original. I'll vocal line it. If there's pitching stuff, I'll melodyne, and I'll make sure the timing is as exact as possible. And then I'll match EQ the new version to the old version. And then I'll bounce that out, bringing down the width because it just felt too wide compared to the original. Some compression, more sidechain. I felt like it was just missing tape distortion compared to the sample. And just for like, I'll still use this as far as like for vocal stuff. So it's just like an easy set it and forget it kind of thing.
See you later, boy.
Good. That's it. Vintage verb. Yeah, I love these, like the super ambient tight presets, and then I'll tweak from there. But like, it just kind of, again, once I had narrowed it down to closer to what the original sample sounded like, then I'm bringing it out the way I kind of had it. And this is just like really nice that putting it in a space. EQ, some multi-band. And again, Spectre just kind of boosting.
Yeah.
Dale duro papi, dale más duro. 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 Dale duro papi, dale duro papi, dale más.
And again, that's the way he sang it in the original. It's like this, like distorted, muffled kind of.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sick. So you're saying that the track's all arrangement. So can you walk us through like your process on decisions in the arrangement? Like, do you progress drums? Do you go like, oh, my intros are always this because of this? Like, what do you think works best?
I had this idea in my mind, like when I first made it, I was like, I kind of want to make something that maybe like the Martinez brothers would play, but it's still my vibe. Like, and I'm like, I love the way they play. And I was like, they've been doing a lot of the Latin stuff. Once I had probably this, right? I had a loop of this going, and then it was an idea of like, okay, how do I introduce the vocal, right? I can do traditional arrangement of like, everything's going to come in without the vocal, and then there's going to be a little break, and then the vocal is going to be introduced, and then it's going to go back, right? Have the vocal already be at the intro. Like, you're not hearing any bass line yet. So this, from the intro, you're not hearing everything yet. Everything's filtered. And I just kind of wanted to like loop it as many times as possible without getting boring. And then the payoff is like, yeah. And then from there, it's just feel like, if you listen to like a lot of these more underground records, like they're like bar structure half the time doesn't make any sense, you know? And it's like, people want something unexpected to happen. That keeps it interesting. This, I didn't go too crazy with that, but it is just about the way things are cutting in and out.
Do you have any sort of like tricks or anything for testing out the arrangement and feeling if it feels right? Is it that when you sort of play it or anything like that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you'll know when certain sections drag out more than anything, because the room will get really awkward for a minute or whatever. So yeah, it really helps to be able to test it, and don't be afraid to just drop in someone else's track and the arrangement you really like and you've played out and you're confident that works, and kind of guide a basic arrangement around that. Referencing is the key to all of this, right? It's, you can have a great idea, but maybe miss the mark on what it should sound like.
In terms of the actual synths on this track, you made sort of an interesting decision. Do you want to sort of talk us through that?
Yeah, I didn't think it needed anything synth wise, and the bass is a synth, and then I have just a couple yeah, I didn't think it needed any synths. What can you add like that's a real synth? Maybe a stab or something. It just felt less organic adding anything else. There's a couple things in there that are synthy, but this was a sample, just like an acid thing in the build-up. And to be honest, I don't even know if this makes sense. I heard it solo and I'm like, that's kind of weird, but it just works. So it just
It'll work.
Yeah, and then at the drop, I just chop a little piece. Yeah, that's synth-wise, that's pretty much it. There is a riser, drone. Vandalism.
Damn, dude. Taking it back.
Yeah. Honestly, I just like dude, I mean, Silent is the OG. And I was like, okay, I need some shitty held kind of super solid trance sound that I can have as a starting point and then mess with.
It works, dog.
Yeah, that's it. And then just this little Silent white Sometimes I'll use samples for white noise, but in this instance, it just was easier, and then I can kind of saturate it a little bit, but nothing on it. Not even other EQ. Yeah, a bit of EQ. And yeah, that's pretty much it. There's
sick.
Yeah.
So I guess one of my last questions on this then is that I think about this track as being sort of like a driving groovy track. Do you have any sort of thoughts on what makes a track a driving groovy track, and that sort of style, and what you've got to do to get that sort of effect?
You could come up with a million bass lines, but I think the turnaround of the bass line is for those like rolling, tracks. It's like, what makes it get back to the one where it feels, where it's not boring, but it just like, it connects it. So like paying attention to what the bass line is the key, I think, for like the like rolling groovers, like, and the drums. Some of my records that I've been doing have a lot simpler drum patterns. This one felt like it needed full hats. I needed to feel like everything was like connected. The groove and the rollingness is from the bass line.
A lot of the audience is sort of up and coming producers. I think it's really interesting what you said about clearing vocals. And I think one of the things for up and coming producers is feeling like they're sort of behind because they can't use vocals and things. Do you have any advice for them around that? Any sort of thoughts?
I get a lot of people asking me too. It's like, oh, where can I find vocalists to work with? And if you're a new artist, it's a lot harder to like find a fucking sick singer-songwriter who's has a lot of experience and is willing to work with you if you don't have a track record. So Splice, up until recently, I'd say is a great option. Loop Cloud is less used and abused. They have some great vocal samples on there. But unless you're getting to these newer packs before anyone jumps on it, like, it's going to be done by someone else. So my suggestion is, either find dope local rappers, singer-songwriters, work with them, or just use samples. Use samples and hope you're going to get noticed by a bigger label and they're going to be willing to clear it.
So you say you have your own label, right? So
yeah,
let's assume you got this track that came out on Spotify. It's okay. And then you use the same vocal that they did, but you do it differently, of course. It's not like the same. Would you consider signing that, or would you consider that like, oh no, we can't do it because of that one track?
My first instinct is like, someone else did this already. If I'm hearing it, I'm doing the radio show I do every week. I know what's kind of, what's new that's coming out every week that people are paying attention to. So if it's on my radar, almost instantly I'll be like, I already heard another label, someone else do this same vocal. If I sign something or I say I'm excited about something, and between the time of me doing it or me signing it and then it coming out, someone else does it, then I don't care. I'll be like, in my conscience is clear, like, this was already done before anyone else did it.
All right, and this is my last question to you. So you said that you know what's coming up, right? So because you have your podcast, you're gonna be on top of it. So with Tech House the way it is now, where do you think it's headed, or what do you think is the new thing that's gonna be coming in this year?
You could see it already. Like, some people are going more techno. Most people are going more progressive. So I think like the melodic techno sound mixed with like kind of tech house groove is what people are jumping on. But I think we're just at a point where people just want to hear like cool shit, right? So on the other side of it, you have Michael Beebe, who's, I think, the most exciting producer and the whole Solid Grooves like sound. So, I don't know, man. I think people always connect to melody. So there's a better chance for that sound to just continue to grow. But it's hard in that sound to not sound like everyone else. But I guess Tech House is kind of the same. But you look at someone like Michael Beebe, I think is just so different and cool that I'm seeing more and more people kind of gravitate to that even on the production side.
All right, Sid. So thank you so much for coming to In the Dojo with us and showing us the track Duro. We learned a lot of great stuff. Now, with that being said, is there anything that you have going on that you want to let the world know about?
Yeah, man. Well, thanks for having me on the show. That was a lot of fun. I just put out a collab with Joshwa, How We Do. It's on Republic Mars. Make sure you go check that out. And just, yeah, check me out on my socials. I'm just constantly putting out new music. If anyone has any questions, you can always DM me and I'm happy to answer, whatever.
Awesome, Sid. That's good of you to offer. And with that being said, guys, this has been In the Dojo with Ssol and Sid. And I'll catch you guys next time for another video. You guys take care and you guys have an amazing day.